Welcome to NYC Jewelry Week 2022. We're the co-founders. My name is JB Jones.
And I'm Bella Naiman.
And we're really excited to welcome you here for our 2022 virtual program on our official YouTube page. Please go hit subscribe so you know all the other programs that we're dropping here on YouTube this week. And head to our website at NYCJW22.com to see all the in-person programs we're doing in New York, as well as a full list of the virtual programs we're doing here.
We're really excited about this upcoming virtual program. If you have any questions or comments for the participants, please feel free to leave them in the chat. And even though it's not a live program, we will make sure that they get them. Thank you so much for joining us. Sit back and relax and have some fun. Bye.
Hi, Forbes. Oh, I should only say that good evening because it must be late in Mauritius. It's lovely to see you.
Thank you, Mazzi. Nice to see you as well.
Cool. So I think we will basically start because everyone is excited to hear about Patrick Mavros, which is arguably one of the heritage houses, African heritage houses that are actually entirely based in Africa, operating in Africa. And so that's a really exciting position for your family to be in from a historic perspective. And I just want to take you back a bit because it's obviously a love story that fostered the beginning of the brand. You know, so you and your wife, Kate, are now running the fine jewelry brand out in Mauritius, but your father, Patrick, who obviously is brand name's eponymous name,
yes,
made a pair of earrings for your mother, Katya. And from that, in 1978, a brand was born. So I wanted to know a little bit more about that love story and how your family found yourselves building a jewelry house out in Zimbabwe.
Yeah, thank you, Mazzi. So pretty much exactly how you described it. Dad was actually sick at the time. I'm going back probably about 43, 44 years ago. And while he was recovering in hospital, he actually made my mum a pair of earrings. And it turned out that she wore them to the salon. And at the time, my dad was actually working in a bakery. And it just kind of, very organic. It got to the point where my mom wore them and a friend wanted a pair and a friend of a friend wanted a pair. And it was very much started in a garage. And it grew like that, very organically. And I got to the point where it was, definitely, a thriving business out of Zimbabwe, right back in 1980. So yeah, and that's how it started, and it was very much born out of a gift of love, which was a pair of earrings, and then I have three brothers as well. We're all involved in the business, and my wife Kate, who's American, and she's also a jeweler. We actually met at the Gem and Mineral Show in Tucson, Arizona. So
wow! So some of the crowd here who are watching from NYC Jewelry Week will be very familiar with that show. So,
absolutely, and it takes me. So the story of this love story kind of keeps circling within our sphere, within our brand. And when I was young, the first piece of jewelry I can ever remember making was for my mother. And in those days, it was early 1980s, and the phones were those big, heavy, cranky phones. And you used to have a party line where you actually shared one number amongst the whole neighborhood. It was very, very retro. But you had to wait. There's certain times when you could make a call or receive a call, and it was like a big thing getting a call. Like the phone would ring, and the kids would get excited and who is it? And so my mum was on the phone, and we were doing that silly thing that kids do, is where you mimic your parent, and you're playing the fool, and that's really annoying. And my mum, while she was on the phone, took her shoe off and threw it at me, and I of course I dived out the way, and it hit her favorite teapot on the counter, which went smashing to the ground. So I was really upset that I'd hurt my mom's feelings, and she had broken her teapot. So I actually made her a necklace with all the shards of the teapots.
Oh my goodness, that's so romantic. That's really and very on trend now, sort of upcycling found objects. you know, and very, very schmucktastic, sort of different materialism as well. But it's really interesting because of I mean, if you allow me to share, my initiation into your brand was also a love story, because the earrings I'm wearing today are a first Christmas gift from my husband, and that was 8 years ago this December. So I can see why love is imbued. But I want to talk about what the family is initially best known for, which is really masters of silversmithery and silver. And the first slides you have in your presentation highlight the Ndoro collection. So I want to know a little bit, first of all, about the silversmith and the silver focus. And then obviously you can take us through particular pieces or, you know, rationale, design, language of the Mavros brand.
Yeah, I think just before we come on to that, it's kind of a fun fact within our kind of our timeline and our history as a brand is we do a lot of casting, and that's lost wax casting. And for those familiar with the process, and for those who are not familiar with it, it's essentially an age-old process that dates back to, you know, before Christ, back to, you know, some experts would say back to the Egyptian days, where beeswax was used to make a model, and then that wax model was cased in clay, and with bellows they would melt out the wax in that mold, and then they'd smelt their gold and pour it in. And that was really, you know, a very rudimentary way of lost wax casting. So that was really the genesis of my father's work, was lost wax casting, but he didn't know how to do it. And Dad didn't go to art school or anything like that. He's totally self-taught. So he heard of a casting course in Scotland, actually. And it was a big trek to get from Zimbabwe to Scotland in those days. And, you know, it just started, not much money at all. It was really just out of his garage. And so he got there, and it was a 3-week course to do lost wax casting. And he got there, and he, you know, met the instructor, and he said, "You got to teach me this in 3 days. I've got a family to feed."
Wow. My goodness. So Dad, just straight to the point.
So Dad really, yeah. So he is very much a self-taught man and a you know, creative genius. And a lot of our pieces are cast. So that means we would sculpt an original piece in wax or clay or whatever it may be, and then make molds. Some of our pieces are fabricated entirely by hand, so it's just like from the metal of fabrication. So there's all different tools and methods. But the Ndoro collection is interesting because a lot of people know us for our inspiration of wildlife and nature. And for us, the Ndoro is a important feature in our brand. The Ndoro is actually a seashell. It's a base of a shell, a conus virgo shell. And it's pretty much, conus tells you how it looks because it's a cone shape. And what happens is with this particular shell is when the mollusk, which is the organism that lives inside the shell, when that dies, that shell washes up onto the beach. And with abrasion and that, you know, that shell knocking up against the beach, you're left with the eroded base, which is that eternal spiral, that spiral shape, that starting in the small center and radiating out. And this is a symbol that we see universally in all sorts of cultures. It's like a symbol of eternity in many cultures, and longevity, and of course good fortune. And so this kind of this ever-giving circular energetic movement is really what the Ndoro is about. And when you take Ndoro in the context of Africa, and particularly southern and southeastern Africa, so Mozambique through to Zimbabwe and Zambia and Malawi, all the way maybe up to southern parts of Tanzania, Pemba, and then down to the north coast of Natal, or you have this is where the conus virgo, this type of sea, this mollusk lives and grows. And these Ndoros were found inland from the coastal regions. They were traded inland as a form of currency.
Like cowrie shells in Western Africa.
Cowrie shells, they're a form of currency, a form of status, and typically in parts of Zimbabwe where we have our paramount chiefs, the Soswe people. Only the kings and the aristocracy and the courtiers were allowed to wear Ndoro. So that's the story of it, and it's kind of, we love it because it's universally accepted and recognized, and for all those reasons I've just described. It's also, you know, has formed, you know, it's one of our iconic designs in that sense that it's not immediately an animal, which we're very well known for doing and representing animals. So I like it, and I like the meaning behind it as well.
Yeah, it it's also really
people who aren't really, like.
Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead. No, go ahead.
You go. No, I was going to say, because it's interesting that you have created sort of a portal, like you said, that you know, in prior times or historically, only one set of class could wear it, and now by it acting as a sort of inspiration point for your collection, it sort of widens the remit of those who can participate, which, you know, in these you know, more trying to sort of say I won't say meritocratic, but in these times where, you know, we're more socially fluid and in flux, it's an interesting comment that your brand has chosen to create a collection around. And it's interesting also that you've got a belt buckle. So accessories as well as jewelry is something you guys have always been comfortable with from the get-go.
Yeah, we actually, you know, and then that brings me on to other parts of our kind of our offerings as far as designs and products are concerned. It's jewelry, it is accessories that we've pointed out, it's tableware, and yeah, we do a lot of men's stuff. I mean, with quite a few men in the
I was going to say there are lots of brothers that, to be fair, Catcher's outnumbered or was outnumbered until the wives until the wives came along.
And I have two daughters, so my brother has a daughter, so finally there's
a bit of a balance, gender balance.
Yeah, so that's a good thing. We need more women running this world, trust me.
Oh, but no, so tell me a little bit about why what was that decision? Because obviously Patrick is an autodidact. Was it a question of he just wanted to create a bigger challenge for himself, hence the expansion into tableware and other objets in silver? Was that sort of the rationale?
Yeah, it kind of started with birds. My dad, from a very, very early age, loved birds. He used to sketch them as a kid at school, and so, you know, very early on, and as early as when he was making jewelry, he was sculpting. So the jewelry and the sculpting and the objet were growing simultaneously and feeding off each other. So, you know, my dad was making beautiful objet, and that was, you know, going, and eventually it grew to table objet, to lovely miniatures, in very very realistic interpretations of physics.
Are you there?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I don't know what happened there. It sounded a bit pitchy.
Sorry.
No, okay, you were saying. So you were saying about interpretations, and then it sort of went a bit pitchy.
Yeah,
sorry for those watching. I had a moment there.
Sorry, right from an early stage, the sculptures and the jewelry were growing together. So dad was making beautiful little objets and large objets right from the get-go. Yeah.
It's amazing because, I mean, you've mentioned obviously your father's love of birds, but your family brand identity features an elephant, and if we have the elephant collection, which is a bestseller, I know, for the brand, But I want you to tell us a little bit about why you guys chose the elephant. Because obviously there could have been many contenders in the African bush to be the motif, the house motif. And was there a specific comment or specific affinity to elephants? And also I want to know a little bit about what do you feel your sort of unique take is on animalia? Because obviously there are lots of jewelry houses across the world that are, inspired by wildlife. But how do you see the differentiator for you guys at Patrick Mavros?
Sure, thanks, Mazzi. Well, the elephant really was one of the very first creatures that my father created and sculpted in silver. So it was always there from the beginning. I mean, it's such an incredible subject. For us, we don't get tired of elephants. Their longevity, their noble demeanor. Exactly. The elephant is there, and in fact, the little elephant on our logo, as you pointed out, well, he's actually a big elephant, and he was a famous single tusker. He only had one. His name is Chupatani, and he's the iconic elephant of Zimbabwe, or one of the iconic elephants. So yeah, the elephant, also transcends, cultures globally. It's something loved and revered across the board, and for us, it's a very kind of steady, guiding type, calming energy that the elephant has, and we just identify with that, and it's always been there from day one. Yeah, it was never really a question of what other animal, it was the elephant.
The elephant was like the winner by and it's really interesting because, like you said, it is very evocative. I mean, I'm from Uganda, so sort of more your neck of the woods than where I currently live now in Lagos, and so it is something that's enduring. Anyone who comes from Savanah country, elephants are very much part of even the folklore, and the sort of the proverbs, traditional proverbs and such. But it's really interesting how you've also interpreted it into modern forms, because you have pendants here with a cross, you have pendants here with a heart pendant, but there's still an elephantine twist to it. So it's that idea of its universality, again, sort of saked with, traditional or contemporary design motifs that we see. So it's really quite beautiful in that regard.
Thank you. Yeah, we basically, are continuing to have iterations of our original designs, and it's one of these lovely areas of inspiration that keep giving.
It is, and I think that's also sometimes a real challenge, because I think sometimes as a designer you can be always in pursuit of the new, but then also there's something about extending and expanding on a design thesis you've already proposed, and sort of thinking, okay, what would this be if it were a tie-pin? What would this look like if it were a pair of cufflinks? And so on and so forth. Or if we just had them as tiny studs that you could just wear every day rather than a more formal piece. But, we're sort of heading, because obviously in your biography, which, was very interesting, that you sort of studied in Edinburgh, and then after Edinburgh went off and worked with the Richemont group. And this sort of ties in with sort of the next collection, which I think sort of is creeping gradually to what you're currently doing now, which is the Sea Urchin collection. And why I say that is because we have an introduction of precious stones, we have an introduction of yellow gold, whereas, your father's design sort of landscape, for want of a better phrase, is very much rooted in silver. And although we're still with sort of sea creatures, because we've just moved on from the mollusks to the sea urchins, so we've moved on to the Indoro. But I want to ask you about what inspired that shift or expansion. And correct me if I'm wrong, if these are actually designed by your dad, with sort of using the yellow gold, with using the pearls, and with using the chrysoprase, because it does create for a completely different feel, but still feels very much at home in your key brand DNA.
Yeah, well, I think Yeah, circling to those questions and observations, Mazzi. Basically, I moved here to Mauritius about 17 years ago, and I set up a workshop or atelier. Mm-hmm. And what happened is, I got here, and Mauritius is, for our listeners, and forgive me, I don't treat anyone as ignorant, but it is a tiny island. It's only 60 kilometers long and 40 kilometers wide, and it's literally a little pinhead in the Indian Ocean. So, and
it's a pinhead that people, it's a pinhead that people know for sort of honeymoon destination or dream honeymoon destination.
Yes, but often, but not very well known, and with the American audience, because Mauritius is, they do have the Caribbean and the US to go to.
To be fair, exactly. To be fair,
so it's a lot of the European countries and African countries that visit Mauritius. So when I'm in America and they, I'm often asked, where am I from? And if I say Mauritius, they go, hang on, and they're kind of thinking about where that is, and then I go, Madagascar. It's close to Madagascar.
That's the bigger island.
the dodo bird. So yeah, bird. So yeah, basically I got here, and it's a really incredible and beautiful country. From, you could relate it to Hawaii, I guess, if you're in America, with these kind of a lot of microclimates, high mountains with tropical green kind of mountainous vegetation, and down to the coastline, beautiful beaches, coral reefs. Mauritius is surrounded by a barrier reef, so you really have this incredible transition of like greens into blues, and it's just a beautiful place. Lovely people, very peaceful. It's a very peaceful nation, and it's made up of people from all backgrounds. It was French at one point. It's you have all sorts of religions here. We are very multi-linguistic and multi religious country with great coexistence. A good example, actually, Mauritius is to the rest of the world, and how to get on with a lot of different folks from all sorts of walks of life. So we're proud of that, and so yeah, happy to be here, and that's really what started this sea urchin and this journey into the ocean. And there's so much color. Like, I mean, you put on a snorkeling mask and you go into the ocean, it's like you're seeing color everywhere. So it was kind of, it made sense that the stones and the color would come into our work, and the gold and these kind of juxtapositions of materials and colors. That said, I did, as you say, I studied in the UK. I then went on to also study in the Richemont Group, and ended up working for a short period of time with the Richemont Group. So I was being exposed to stones in the world of gems.
Exactly. The home of Cartier, for those who are listening. I'm sure that's the obvious association when people hear Richemont. But yes, continue.
Yes, sure. So from an early age, I was very interested in stones. I mean, I've always loved that aspect to it. So that's been slowly fed into our brand, our company, and with working with stones, there's also a skill set that's required. So it hasn't, it's been a journey of wanting to do. It's also been a journey of learning, that kind of thing. So as our brand has grown, we are very multidisciplinarial now, and also what's great about us, and we really are proud of the fact that we're a true maison, in the sense that everything is done in-house. We don't outsource our designs, we don't outsource our prototyping or our manufacturing or our marketing or our retailing. It is truly like, and that's becoming a rare animal these days in the world of beauty. So
I think so, yeah. And it's interesting that you touch upon that about being, sort of an old school atelier, because I imagine, I see you've got rings on offer in this sea urchin collection. So I'm imagining you also have a bespoke offering. So if people are wanting a one-of-a-kind piece to propose, because you are doing things in an intimate, by hand way, those things become possible, and you will have something that's truly one of a kind and not something that you see. I mean, again, not to disrespect mega brands that are global, but you know, you've seen one and then you can be on the tube or on the metro, on the subway, and see another girl with the exact same engagement ring. So there is something quite special about having that and choosing that, given that you work somewhere that is very much the citadel of scaling up jewelry houses in your training. So tell me as well, I mean, do you have a specific, now that you've sort of ventured more into these colored gemstones, do you on a personal level have a specific favorite gemstone that you love working with, or or is it an equal ops kind of game? Is it a bit like Mauritius, all walks of life? Everyone is welcome. All the gemstones, come one and all.
Yeah, I always say my go-to stone is what I'm currently working on. So you know, like I fall in love with what's like right in front of me, and I'm going like I'm exploring this. So like currently at the moment, I'm in love with fossilized coral. You know, and then when I move on to my next thing, I'm going to be in love with that as well, because that's where that's just passion. But fossilized coral is really interesting because it is primarily found in only 2 countries in the world. Well, Florida, so the US, but the state of Florida, and Indonesia. The Floridian variety is kind of bleached, so it doesn't hold the color. But what you have with the Indonesian variety, it's incredible because it has the color, but it's very rare. And we spend a lot of time thinking about using materials and combining materials that we don't see other people playing with. So it's kind of cool in that sense. And it really takes, for me, the fossilized coral really takes you into this world of the organism. And it kind of reminds me of, you know, science class and looking at things under a microscope. So when you look at this material from a very macro, or sort of from a very micro kind of view, you're really captivated into how this coral grew and how it became fossilized 30, 40 million years ago. So, and the fact that it's basically coral that was deposited when the oceans receded 30 million years ago, and it's become agatized. So basically the coral becomes a stone through geological processes of pressure and heat. And the other name for it is bunga agate, and I just like that name. It kind of sounds wild.
Bunga agate, and is that an Indonesian name? The bunga agate.
Yeah.
Yeah, it sort of sounds like a party. That might be that's for me. Sort of, some bunga agate, please.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
And it's interesting because your choices
very cool.
And interesting with the choices you've done with it, because you've got, you know, it seems like you're almost working on the natural, sort of the classic shapes that always look good in planet jewelry, like a beautiful pendant drop, a pear drop. I mean, whether, you know, it's timeless, but in the materialism usage, and then also the diamonds, because you don't just use white diamonds. Tell me more about your choice of using champagne diamonds and cognac colored diamonds, and what sort of drove that for this particular
what drove that is Kate and I, and I'm sorry she's not here to also talk about it, my amazing wife and fellow jewelry designer and partner in business, because we've always had a penchant for natural diamonds, fancy colored diamonds, well before they became a thing. It's just the earthiness that we gravitate towards, and we kind of feel, and how we were trying to direct and channel this collection was touching on an earthy feeling, you know, and something that is fine and elegant, like you mentioned, with the kind of the shapes. But the materials warranted for us something quite earthy. So yeah, that was it. And then the color palette we found just worked really nicely with this collection.
No, it's really quite beautiful. I mean, I remember sort of because obviously, like I said, I was more sort of conversant with the brand's original sort of design offering, and seeing what you're doing here in the fine jewelry space is really exciting, because it's also speaking to working with what's around you. You know, you're surrounded by the Indian Ocean, so what's occurring? It seems like it's bunga agate, so let's go and use that. But I want to ask, because obviously the questions are always around with coral. I mean, how is sourcing, obviously we think about environmental degradation, how easy, tricky is it to find this fossilized coral?
Yeah, it's a good question. I'm glad you brought that up, because it mustn't be confused with coral jewelry like the Mediterranean red corals that are, well, up until, I mean, still today are being harvested as live plants, so, and live animals, which, yeah, that's not good. So this is a stone that's 30 million years old ago, you know, 30 million years old. The coral was living 30 million years ago, and it's like petrified wood. If you imagine, it's the same process of how wood over millions of years becomes petrified or becomes a stone, basically.
Yes.
So this is mined. It's very artisanal. Last year, none was found. It's a group of local guys, and they have it's amazing. I won't mention his name, but he's this crazy hippie that ended up in Sumatra and Borneo, like, you know, in the early 1970s, and found it. And he has a little concession up in the coastal mountains, and it's mined by hand, just like with, as you imagine, with a pick. A pick and a shovel. Some years they don't find any. Last year we bought 60% of what they found. This year they haven't found any. So it's a real word of mouth thing. Especially this quality. You come across it. You do come across it, but definitely not of this quality. So we really kind of found what we feel
as interesting, because that also brings us back.
Yeah.
And you know what you were just saying about sometimes some years you find and some years you don't. I suppose that makes it, as a result, it gives a sort of, you know, a slower consumption model for the consumer. You can't just keep saying, I want more, I want more, I want more, because there might not be any more to have. And I can imagine that also creates a sort of rarity element. You know, first of all of that's going on at the atelier is by hand, so already there's a scalability that we don't make thousands of the same thing. And then secondly, what we find is what we find. So there's going to be an element of specialness, actually, you know, of, you know, and sort of you know, you feel sort of lucky to have any. But I wanted to ask you as well about the process, and again, with, you know, a permit to correct me. So when you said you make everything, so even the setting of the diamonds, that's all going on in Mauritius?
All going on here. We're traditional jewelers, so yeah, everything is set. I mean, yeah,
that's amazing.
Totally, we fabricate these by hand out of metal, from pouring a metal ingot to hand drawing the wire plates, and totally by hand, which is cool.
Amazing. And so obviously you said to me just now that this is the love for now, in terms of the stone that we're currently in love with, and until the next one blows you away. But one thing I want to really touch upon, because is that the enduring love affair with the whole of Africa for the brand. Because fine, you were founded in Zimbabwe, but it's interesting that apart from your London flagship, all the expansion points have been within Africa. So for those listening, So, you know, Zimbabwe's in Southern Africa. You also have a retail outlet in Namibia, which is, you know, again, the less obvious choice than SA. And then you're also out in Kenya and in Mauritius. And, you know, and obviously, you know, your original citadel, which is Zim in Zimbabwe. So I want to ask you that what sort of drove the, we're going to be Pan-African expansion? Was it just sort of, we're Africans, so we're just going to be all about Africa rather than chasing, I must have a retail space in New York, I must have a retail space in Hong Kong? It's a really interesting decision that you made as a family business. And I'm sure those who are not from Africa would be, you know, intrigued to know why you chose to do that. Obviously, I'm biased because I'm from Africa.
so am I. But
exactly. And we're the biased people, like, duh, of course, Africa. But someone might be like,
yeah, but for us, you know, we're an African luxury brand, and we are very committed to the continent, very committed to its people, and very committed to its natural resources. And that's a story that we very proud of telling, and very proud of supporting, you know, those elements. And it's an African journey, and everything in Africa is a story, as you'll know. You know, there's not a quick sentence in Africa.
There isn't.
You know,
and I also
you greet, you tell stories,
exactly.
so that's who we are, and we're very community oriented, and it's grown like that. Of course, we you know, we definitely have a growth strategy that takes us out of Africa. In fact, London was, we've obviously been in Zimbabwe since the beginning, and London was our first international flagship, set up by my brother Alexander, who's really the driving force in terms of our growth strategy. So having set up London, for us, London is a benchmark in terms of luxury. If you want to go to the world and say we're a luxury brand from Africa, you know, people like look at, you make that in Africa? Well, we don't know, you know.
Exactly.
So we needed a bit, you know, London gives any brand, whether you're African or wherever, you could be a brand from Jaipur. If you're trying to make it on the international stage and try to get that respect from the audience, London gives pedigree.
It definitely does. It definitely does. And also it's got a very strong and natural and innate historical links to Africa. I mean, empire and such. But also, I think what's really interesting is also a conduit for many parts of the world. It's 6 hours in one direction, you're in America, 6 hours in the other direction, you're in Asia. So it is as a sort of location.
London is very international. It's very global. So that was London. Then going back to Africa was very much we want to grow this brand in Africa and be known, you know, as the definitive luxury brand from Africa. And it comes at the right time, because I think that finally, you know, the world is starting to give a bit of long overdue attention to the designers and the creatives from Africa. I mean, it's so long overdue, and
it's actually a little. I mean, I think it's so interesting, you know, buttressing your point of, you know, attention to Africa. But I've always been very keen is that Africa is not a monolith, and nor are we a monoculture. So there's a lot of assumption, and obviously where most of our listeners and our audience will be in America, where people think everyone in Africa is black like me, and yet Africa has for thousands, hundreds of years had people from Asia, people from the modern day one people say, you know, the Indian subcontinent, European descent people, etc., the whole bit. And actually, you know, trade flows have been going even for thousands of years. If you taking the trans-Arabian trade routes, which were an extension of the Silk Route. And I think it's a good sort of challenging riposte to assuming, and people like yourself, myself, are from Eastern and Southern Africa. You can, you go to Harare, you're seeing everybody there. Whereas I think some other parts of Africa, it is a little bit more monolithic in look and feel, shall we say. But even then, if you look more closely, you will still see, everybody of every hue. And I think it's really important to challenge this notion that Africa is Black Africa. I think Africa, like any continent on the world, hosts people of different colors. And I think it's really great to challenge that notion, and in the luxury space as well. So I think it's exciting.
Yeah, no, fully good point. Yeah.
No, but I want to ask you, what are the future plans that you can share before we close out our conversation with our NYC Jewelry audience who have joined us this evening?
Yeah, future plans, Maz. Always create, always be open-minded, always be thankful, really. I think next year is going to be interesting. We've got some, we're very conscious now of the macro economy in the world and where people are sitting financially and catering for needs. We sell jewelry that, you could, our entry prices, $60 US, $50 US, and right the way up to hundreds of thousands of dollars. So we're proud of that. We've always tried to remain accessible and not exclusive. I think you can remain accessible, but keep exclusivity in terms of you can be exclusive in your design. You can be exclusive in your philosophies and your thinking and your presentation and your storytelling. But I think being accessible is important moving forward in the jewelry industry. And still making beautiful things, handmade pieces that are accessible. That's going to be big for the coming year, I feel. Coming years is definitely, a retraction, I feel, in the industry. And yeah, so exciting times designing collections that are meaningful in this point in time.
I think so. I think you've touched upon something really important, which is being a reflection of where we are now, and luxury being more inclusive. And what does inclusive mean? We spoke about Africa sort of being out of the luxury conversation until relatively recently, and there's more increased interest, whether it's in jewelry or in the creative visual arts like painting, sculpture, or design, fashion. So it's really interesting that you sort of touched upon that, but also this idea of why does it mean that predicate, if you want to have a beautifully designed piece of jewelry, you have to have the millionaire lifestyle to go with it. And I think that's a very important point, that good design should be available, or possible, should we say, to all those who choose to seek it, And I'm sure the elephants will agree with us. I'm sure those animals known for longevity, they'll be in concert.
They'll be nodding in approval, right?
Exactly. Oh, it's been an absolute joy speaking with you, Forbes. Thank you so much for taking the time out. And it's really great to invite you to be part of the NYC Jewelry Week conversation, because lots of different artists, makers, designers, creators, conversants like myself, the thread is jewelry and a love of it.
Thanks, Mazzi. I really appreciate that. It was really fun being on the show, and lots of love to all of you guys, and take care. Best wishes.
Thank you. Take care. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.